For anyone looking to make sense of what is a challenging market at the moment, this one's for you. A fascinating conversation with Nathan Emerson. He's CEO of Propertymark, and we had a fantastically detailed conversation about the challenges, about the pressures that renters are facing, landlords are facing, buyers, sellers, agents. There's a lot going on, so it's a really in-depth conversation, good practical advice. This one's for you. Well, it's a great job we've got you to talk to, Nathan. Always the man of sense.
Thank you, Phil.
Mixed signals. Is that fair that the market's showing at the moment? How would you sum things up? It's difficult.
It is, and I think that's a very, very fair statement to make. We're seeing a lot of regional variations happening out there as to activity, pricing, and how buyers are assessing that marketplace, really. I think the other thing to think about is the time of year we are now, usually coming out of the summer, September, October, November, are traditionally that little boost period where people are trying to get themselves in for Christmas. Mm-hmm. So it's a very important part of the housing market cycle, which sets up the beginning of next year as well. And I think what we've seen this year is because we've got a late budget, yes, which is obviously not going to hit us for another few weeks yet, we are in a situation where that has caused a little bit of uncertainty for people holding fire, both from selling and buying, until they know the outcome of the budget.
So a bit of a pause.
I think a little bit of a pause.
Yeah, perfectly understandably. People don't like making these big decisions when there is uncertainty. Actually, they've still got to make the decisions.
Absolutely.
Life goes on.
It's a matter of time, isn't it,
yes,
really? Time takes care of all. But there are opportunities for people who continue to go ahead now. And if anything, that's probably not a bad thing to do.
From your Propertymark sort of coverage right across the country, are you seeing any particular trends at the moment?
We are. So London, I don't think there's any secret that market has quietened down quite considerably. I think there's a number of factors for that. And London's a good barometer for the rest of the country. You often find what happens in London tends to permeate out over the following 6 to 9 months. You look at other areas, maybe the southwest. I was talking to an agent from there the other day. They're still fairly busy. You look at people in the Midlands, that's gone a bit quieter. So you've got the northeast again, low housing there, so they've got a constant supply of people buying, but it's still challenging. So we're seeing different variations in different regions. And I think one of the biggest areas that people obviously were concerned about was when stamp duty for first-time buyers got cut, if you remember, in the April 2025. Yeah. But the concern from that probably is more a London-centric thing, really. The average house price is below 300,000. The stamp duty level first-time buyers is 300,000. So by and large, that hasn't affected the market in the way that people thought it would do, but it certainly will do for more expensive areas like London and some of the more bespoke areas of the country.
So is the London market now very quiet?
It's quieter than it's been, and we're seeing quite a lot of price reductions in that market. Now, part of that could be because London was ramping on, if you remember, and pushing the ceiling, which it always does. And so when you start to see a market needing to correct itself, if you've been a little bit optimistic, sometimes that correction can appear greater than it really should have been had they been sensibly priced in the first place. But we are seeing price reductions happening in London. And when I say price, I mean meaningful price reductions. Okay. That are relining them with where they should have been in the market.
Yeah, if somebody needs to sell.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. But then also, I mean, I agree with you. What tends to happen in London rolls out ripple effect through the country. If London is very quiet now, I wonder what that says about the rest of the country come the new year. Well, but we also got to factor in the budget and the uncertainty.
Absolutely.
That's cool, so
and you get aspirational budgets and you get non-aspirational budgets. And I think we're all aware that there are big challenges for the Chancellor to overcome, and how this budget plays into the housing market can be quite important. Yeah. But equally, I think for people who live out of London and watching the ripple effect, they've got time to make the sensible adjustments to avoid being in a position where they see that slowdown. If they're sensible about what they do, price their properties correctly, there will be buyers out there for them.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this, and I asked this with the knowledge that you represent the interests of estate agents. Is it a good time to sell? If someone's watching this saying, shall I put it on the market? Shall I not? Shall I hold off?
I think the one thing I would say is, and I always believe any time is a good time to sell, and the reason for this is, it's never what you buy and sell for, it's the difference between. So if you're selling your property in a good market, you can get a slightly higher price for it, and that's fantastic. But obviously, when you come to buy onto that next level, if your property's gone up 10% and the one you're looking to buy has gone up 10%, the gap actually is wider.
Got it.
And actually, so if you're making an upmarket move, perversely, it can actually be more advantageous to do that at a lower ebb in the market because the gaps between get closer.
So if you're trading up,
Yeah.
it's better to do it when the market is coming down.
Absolutely. And also, of course, if you're at the end of stage where maybe you're moving from a larger family house down into a bungalow for your final move or an apartment, then obviously you're going to want to maximise. So you want to try and sell at the top of the market if you're moving down market.
Pricing. So important when the market is in this sort of state of flux, but quite difficult to price accurately. It's not a science, is it?
It isn't a science, but what you do find is it's very easy to see where a market sits in a location once you're monitoring the transactions that happen. And a lot of this is about attitude and people's being realistic in pricing to be in tune with the market. And a big part of this is if you look at people's focus on a market, it's very often in today's world. We're looking at where are we this month or next month. But when you buy a house, you're looking over a 15, 18-year period traditionally once you've got ownership of that. So I wouldn't get too worked up about what the price is today, a couple of £1,000 either way. If it's the home you want and it's going to be the home that you live in, then that is more important. And let's take an example. 20 years ago, for example, the average house price was 113,000. And if we were sat there today, we'd be arguing over £250 either way or £500. That same house now is worth 300,000. So the reality is, over the time spell you're there, the ups and downs of a market become pretty much irrelevant. You're going to see growth over that longer period.
So long as you're not forced to sell at any time.
Unless you're not
and I guess that comes into buying the right house to suit your needs in the right area.
It does. And of course, we all go through, family issues, and we all go through health issues, and those are the unforeseen circumstances. But by and large, we do see properties continue to track up over the medium to long period. There were short variations. I wouldn't let this marketplace slow anybody down.
I'm glad you said that, because I often talk about, if you look at the numbers of houses and the numbers of people, it doesn't stack up.
No.
And then we've got immigration, we've got people living longer and leaving home earlier and divorcing more often. It's long-term pressure.
It's absolutely long-term pressure. We do see more and more people, as you say, living together. We see people in longer-term rented accommodation, even into later life. We've got a population that's going to hit 70 million in 2035, and we're not going to build enough houses, even with the new targets, to cope for that. So supply and demand scenarios, if you're on the housing ladder, you're pretty safe, and you're going to see some benefit from that.
Having said all of that, though, Nathan, we are where we are at the moment, and things are sensitive. And if somebody's trying to maximise the value of their house when they come to sell, as they should, what happens if they price it too high?
Well, what we do see statistically is if a house goes on the market at too much money, you often find it actually ends up selling for less money than it could have done if it had gone on the market at the right price. So, for example, if we just take a property at, say, 200,000, the temptation could be to say, well, I'll put it on the market at 210 or 215 rather than 195. Yeah. But then what ends up happening is it doesn't sell at 210, 215, you end up coming down to 205, then you come down to 199,950, and then you end up selling it at around about 190. And you could repeat that story time and time again. Whereas had it gone on the market at the 195 in the first place, or the 205, it would have sold at that level fairly quickly, and that person would have been gone. They wouldn't have been the further 6 months down the market.
Yeah. I've seen that happen so many times as well, and it's sad because it's unnecessary. I understand why it happens and the thought process to being ambitious with your price, but this isn't the time to do that. I've talked about it being a burnt property, and you price too high and you chase it down, then everyone's looking at it going, that's been on the market for months, it must be awful.
What's wrong with it? Why hasn't it sold? So then they go into it with a view to try and knock it down because there's already been that show of weakness because you've had to readjust the price.
But therein comes good agency and good advice from Propertymark members who will be honest.
Absolutely. And sometimes that honesty isn't what you want to hear. It's like going to the doctor and
that's why he
says, Phil, you need to do this or you need to do that, you need to lose weight, you need to do some exercise, whatever that may be. We don't always want to hear it. but they're telling you that for your own good, for you to make an informed decision. And a good agent will give you the honest advice. They'll give you the information that's going to get you the best price at the end of the journey. So it's not what it goes on for, it's what you finally sell it for. And sometimes that's the bit that, for a consumer, it's difficult to understand that journey, but the agent will be looking at what's my opportunity to get the best price I can do in the current market for my client to help them then achieve what they want to do the other end.
Last year, you told us that if you knew a sale or letting agent was a qualified member of a professional body maintaining high industry standards, you would choose them over an agent who was not. Well, agents who are members of Propertymark are not only regulated, but qualified too. There are currently over 18,000 members right across the UK, all adhering to a strict code of conduct and membership rules. And that is why we at Move IQ endorse what they do. To find your local agent, look for Propertymark and let them know I sent you. Let's talk a little bit about preparation of going to market, not just the price and choosing the right agent and all of that, but the administrative preparation and getting all that sorted. What do you advise people to do?
So I think that's a very important point. So let's just put a headline stat in for most people that, you average in a situation that 1 in 3 transactions that are agreed actually do fall through. That's how it works.
It's a big number.
It's a big number. And the one constant factor in this is time. So the longer it takes from you agreeing a sale to exchanging contracts, the more chance you've got of that sale falling through. And what happens traditionally is houses go on the market. There's a lot of focus on marketing the property and selling it, getting a sale agreed. And then what happens is then there's a big lull while lots of paperwork's collated, put together before any activity even happens on the conveyancing process. And an average transaction can take 26 weeks to exchange. Whereas when a house goes on the market and is coming to the market, if a lot of that administrational work is done then, so, we're looking at the property information forms, we're obtaining all the guarantees that we need for the property, boiler servicing, etc., and we prepare all of that ready, what that means is when a sale's agreed, the conveyancers can send out that contract straight away, and you can cut down 3 or 4 weeks off a transaction just by using effectively the dead time while it's on the market till it sells, making sure everything is ready, and a good agent will work through that process with you so you're able to just hit the blocks running.
But it so often doesn't happen, does it? And people sit in their hands and think, I haven't got an offer yet, there's no point doing this. But if you're going to be moving, you're going to be moving.
Absolutely. And of course, think about it. When you get an offer on your own house, what you often do is you run straight out now trying to find somewhere else. So your focus is on getting details of new properties, going and viewing other properties. You feel safe, you've got a buyer, but of course you've not done the paperwork to send off. So we want to deal with that up front. So when you do get a buyer, you can focus wholly on your new home and not have to worry so much about finding the information and rights of way over your own property, really.
When I'm involved in transactions, I'm a massive believer in momentum. You've got to get momentum at the beginning. Everybody involved, shuffling paper, passing it across. Impossible to inject momentum a month down the track.
It is. You wouldn't walk the first 10 metres of a 100-metre race. You'd come out the blocks and go for it. And that is all what we find happens. You've got to drive out from day one to get over the finishing line.
Can we talk a bit about the rental market? Because it's a constant worry for me and a worry for society as a whole, because I don't believe the current situation is sustainable. Supply is really tight.
It is.
Rents are rising rapidly, and that situation has gone on for too long. What could be done? What should be done?
What could be done? Well, this is the supply imbalance, really, Phil. And I think what we've got a private rental sector which has taken on more than it was meant to do. So obviously we originally had a social housing sector in the UK plus an aspirational private rental sector. The private rental sector now is shouldering the burden. So depending on which index you use, there's between 7 and 8 million rented properties in the UK, of which 50% of those, roughly speaking, are handled by the private rental sector. But the problem we've got is we've got an increase in population coming in, and that drives up the rent because of the availability. What has happened, which has been interesting, is we've been finding properties now. So I think last time that we had a conversation, we were looking at 8 to 12 to 13 applications per property coming in, and people frustrated they couldn't even get through the door of a property in the first place. We've now got to the stage where in some areas rents have got so high that properties are going on the market and not renting straight away, even despite the demand out there, because the rents have got to a level which for people is unsustainable for them to pay, and they can't make the income maximums to make it work. So there's a degree of correction going on. It's the first time I've actually said we're actually seeing some rents come down, not because the longer you leave a property stood empty, it's costing you money. But I think the challenge is that obviously the government wants to see rental properties being sold because that releases capital gains tax and stamp duty on anybody subsequently buying it. So there is a big momentum for the government to want people to sell. Their adage.
I'd never thought of that. They were after the stamp duty and then the capital gains tax.
They are. So the adage is the house is still there. So if I'm landlord X, for example, and I've had the house for 20 years, and we're all there saying, no, you've got to leave the rental market alone, that's fine. That house might stay there for another 20 years. Whereas if, for example, a landlord is in a position where they sell that on, then he's got capital gains tax to pay, 20 years worth of capital gains tax, and that puts money into the economy. And, of course, anybody new buying it, whether they're a first-time buyer or a second-time buyer, then you're in a position where you're probably creating then the stamp duty. Okay. And certainly if it's another investor, then you're creating a stamp duty. So that property is still there, whether it's rented out or whether somebody buys it. If another landlord does it, they release some money and it's back in there.
You're so right, and I'd never stopped to think that one through. But it does seem the kind of feeling, the atmosphere is anti-landlords from the government or from HMRC.
I think a lot of landlords are frustrated because they want to deliver a good product. You don't want to throw a tenant out. You've got a lot of legislation coming in down the road now. And one thing that a lot of landlords want to do is they want to keep on top of their properties because it's an investment. But if, for most landlords, you've got a mortgage on a property, which is the main, and all of a sudden you're being taxed, obviously, at the 20% rate on the whole of the income of the rent, so you can't offset the interest from the mortgage in the same way. There's speculation that there might even be national insurance contributions coming out of the new budget, possibly at 8%. By the time you look at all of that coming out from the rent, you end up in a situation there's not a lot of money there to be reinvested in supporting the tenant to have a good quality home. So I think we need landlords to maintain themselves in the market. We do need people to reinvest because at the moment the social housing sector cannot cope with what we're dealing with at the moment. And obviously we need to look at the new homes that are being built, a proportion of those being built in a way and for a style that will suit that mixed use environment, really.
Really interesting stuff. Are there more regulatory changes coming down the track, do you think, for landlords or indeed for tenants?
Well, the good news is yes. So we've got the Renters' Rights Bill, which is literally in the final stages, a massive piece of legislation, and is going to change very much how things operate. It puts a lot more weighting on the tenant side of things. So we've lost various implements, Section 21, which used to be called a no-fault eviction. I mean, arguably it's changed that. There's only specific grounds that you'll be able to let a tenant leave a property. We're looking at an entirely different environment, the opportunity for tenants to be able to have pets in properties. It's a different framework and it's built around the tenant. I think once it beds down, it won't be as bad as everybody feels that it will be, but it is a major shake-up, and it is going to change those dynamics. So, for example, if I'm a landlord and I want to recover my house and I want to sell it, well, if I put it on the market, the chances are I might not be able to actually re-rent that house for a 12-month period. Now, the danger for that, of course, is if I do put my house on the market and we're in a bad market and it doesn't sell, I've then got to sit there with that property before letting a tenant move back into it. Otherwise, I could end up in a position where I'm paying a penalty. So there's various things to work through that process, but it's going to change it massively. I think the other thing to say is that the government's obviously out there now looking at the whole home buying and selling process as well. Well, what do agents do in facilitating that, both from the sales and lettings point of view, and how should they review that whole process? So I think this is the Renters' Rights Bill is one thing from the government, but I think they're going to go a lot further into this whole home buying and selling process, and they're going to push right the way through to get to the nuts and bolts of what they can do to speed it up.
Wouldn't that be nice? But we've been talking about that for years.
We have.
But I don't say that flippantly, because it does feel to me that we are on the edge of something that is really going to change the efficiency and the speed.
I think so. And I think technology is a big driver in this as well, really.
There's so much work, good work, being done out there.
There is indeed.
You mentioned the budget earlier. It feels to me like it's going to be a bit of a milestone budget. And at this stage, it is just conjecture. But what's your take, or what are your members feeling about what's likely to happen?
I think nervous anticipation, I think, is probably a fair way to do that. For a lot of people looking to buy and sell houses, they're wondering, how is that going to affect me? You know, there are talks over stamp duty, for example, reforms. You know, could that go up? Could that go down? Could they look at changing the process? Do you pay it over a period of time?
Yeah.
Would it be an ongoing charge on the property? And so, you know, could there be mansion taxes involved there? You know, so there are going to be some changes. We do know that. What we don't know is what they're going to be and how they're going to affect the day-to-day trading of properties for people, really.
Watch this space.
Watch this space.
Eagerly.
Nervously.
Nervously. Can I put you on the spot, or try and put you on the spot? And maybe this is a tough question, because there is so much going on and uncertainty. We do need to get to the budget. It's pretty close, and then we need to see how the land lies. But there is so much being changed. But if you had to forecast where price is going to be and activity levels in 12 months' time, if I put a gun to your head.
If you had a gun to a head, I'm actually going to be fairly positive on that, because I think the underlying trend, back to what I said earlier, you get the highs and lows of a property market in the short term, but when you zoom out from that graph, you still see that graph going up. Why do we have that? Because we still have a supply and demand issue. We still have more and more people coming in.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of older generation in bigger houses that need to move out of those into smaller properties, releasing cash into the system. So am I going to see mass increases in prices? No. But am I going to see a position where I think prices will absolutely have shelved? No. I think I'll see we'll see a fairly consistent curve, really. I think I don't see anything to take away those drivers. It's a bit like the ocean currents, really. You know, until they stop, then we've got a problem. But I think so long as the government can keep the housing market moving and find ways to bolster that. I mean, let's remember, we've still got fairly low interest rates. You know, there's been a little bit of an increase in the short term, but we're still broadly 4.8, 5.2 over 2 to 5 year fixed rate, which is affordable, you know, over the long term. We've seen that. So the availability is there in the sector. We're seeing a correction in regard to the market and people being more sensible on pricing and having to get that bit lined. So actually, I think if the budget comes through all right, prices are realigned, and the affordability is there, then actually we set ourselves up to have a nice, consistent marketplace going forward.
Wouldn't that be nice?
That would be nice.
I mean, I think you and I agree on this, because life goes on. Markets fluctuate. That's, you know, every market fluctuates. That's the definition of a marketplace. Actually, life goes on, and people get born and married and change jobs and go to school and die and divorce, and those are often the moments that you make these life-changing moves. And it's nice if you can make that in a buoyant market, but actually you probably got to make it anyway.
Absolutely right. And I think that's the driver. So what we do tend to change is the aspirational move, maybe. So that's the bit that goes out the market. If you need to move, you move. The aspirational move is the bit that's that extra 10% that takes a market to be up. And it's whether or not that's in place, really. But the day-to-day mechanisms of people buying and selling, that is circumstance-driven. It's not always aspirational. If
you had one golden piece of advice for people who might be sitting on the fence now, whether they were buyers or sellers or indeed tenants?
I would say know your worth. I think that would probably be what I'd say. In the market that we're in at the moment, as a buyer, if you're in a position to proceed, you know, you are in a fairly strong position, and it's worth going out into the marketplace. You've got more properties on the market at the moment than you've had before. So perversely, when we've spoken, Phil, there's been a shortage of stock, and people have had very little choice as to what they could buy and afford. There's more stock on the market now than we've had for an awful long time. So buyers have got choice, but also they can afford to go out there and negotiate. So now's a good time for them to do that. If you're selling, it's not a bad time to be out there buying, because you may have to negotiate on your sale. But as we said before, if you're moving up market, then actually you're probably more likely to be able to replicate that plus a little bit more on your purchase side of things. And again, for tenants, I think we've, in some areas, not all, but some areas, we've seen the cusp of where affordability can be on rents. So don't be afraid to go out there and make some offers. I think one little bit to add into this is, under the new legislation that's coming through on the Renters' Rights Bill, it won't be a position where tenants can go out and start offering over the asking price. So what used to happen is we'd have a house come on the market, we've had this discussion, tenant would go out, next tenant goes to look at it and they offer more, and you end up with a bidding war. That won't be the case now. So it'll be a case when a house goes to the market, they can accept offers below and up to the price. So as a tenant, don't be afraid if you see something you like, don't be afraid to make an offer and just see how that lands.
So the long and short of it is, buyers and tenants have the whip hand at the moment, and they should use it.
They should get out there and explore it.
Yeah. Nathan, great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Phil.
Wise words as ever.
Thank you.